Good evening. Good evening. First of all, I would like to issue a warm welcome to everyone. I would like to highlight one of our special guests here that we talked about a little bit during the board meeting today, and that is we have the team responsible for out-of-country voting in Iraq with us. And he has joined us as part of the partnership for many years that we have had with the High Election Commission of Iraq. And in just a few days, people in 6 cities across the United States will be voting in the next set of Iraq elections. And this is a great partnership, and we are honored that you are here with us tonight. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all of our other guests and friends. This is very much a meeting of a bond of brothers and sisters who have worked together in elections around the world, and it is truly fitting that we are all here today to recognize the great contribution both to the practice as well as to the intellectual framework of election administration that our honoree is providing on a daily basis and has provided over the course of the last generation. The Joe Baxter Award is very special to all of us here at IFES. Joe was a professional with the DC Board of Elections. He was actually one of the people who designed the opportunity for citizens of the District of Columbia to vote, first for President of the United States and then for their own mayor. One of the best-kept secrets is that oftentimes in federal capitals and federal districts, the citizens who live there do not have what we call home rule and do not get to choose their own leaders, even though they are residents of the nation's capital. And Joe was an election professional who did that over a career for the District of Columbia, retired, joined IFES, and was responsible for the first election laws of Ghana, of Nigeria, of a few countries in Central America. He led the design and practice for election administration on a practical basis. And when we lost him, one of the things that we decided here at IFES was to commemorate his contribution to election administration and the profession that we are all engaged with by naming the annual award for him. We are particularly honored tonight that the ambassador from Denmark has chosen to join us and is here to help recognize the contributions of his fellow countrymen. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over to our chairman, who, if anyone hadn't figured it out, does have some Danish heritage, given his size, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, please don't applaud because you have to put your glasses down. Hey, folks, this is not church. You can move up. Come on, come on. Come on, everyone move up. You beautiful lady in the yellow dress, come on. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. As one who's worked in the international democracy field, at least in this country since its inception, 35 years ago, I can't believe it. I enjoy recognizing the men and women who've made a true impact on election administration. But before I do that, I want to make a special note. I personally have a meaningful and very personal connection to Denmark. Dr. Elklit, my mother, Anna Mathilde Jensen, was born just a few miles from your Aarhus University in Horsens. I was actually raised in a Danish household with an aunt and uncle until about 1946 when they left us, and spoke Danish at a younger age. As I told you, I tried to relearn it at 35 and way beyond my capacity. So as an adult, I was one of the people who helped found the Danish Immigrant Museum in Elkhorn, Iowa, a place that has Danish street signs, Danish newspaper, Danish radio, and a wonderful, wonderful presentation of the Danish heritage, which a lot of us share. To this day, I still send out, don't be offended if you don't get them, hundreds of kringles from O&H Bakery in Racine, Wisconsin, every Christmas time, because the Danes are the essence of good food. Not good for you, but good food. So with a full sense of the independence and courage of the Danish people. It's my honor to introduce to you the current Danish ambassador to the United States, Peter Taxol Jensen, right? His Excellency has represented Denmark, in the United States since 2010. He has a robust legal background and a vast international exposure. He's deep understanding of the rule of law and the importance of integrity in the electoral process. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Let me start by thanking you for the wonderful welcome. I don't know about Danish food, whether it's good or not good for you, but we are actually becoming more and more famous because of the Nordic cuisine. And I'm glad to hear some of those who are the founders of our museum out in Elkhorn. I was there, I've been there twice now, and I was there celebrating their 30th anniversary last summer. And it's really interesting that you can have a museum out in nowhere, and this is out in nowhere. And still you have people coming by. This is typical Danish. Yeah, we should have more aquavit, then more people would come by. We are gathered tonight to celebrate democracy and to honor someone who for many years has been involved in the promotion of democracy and fair elections the world over, my countryman, Mr. Democracy from Denmark, Jørgen Elklit. For those of us fortunate enough to live in free and open societies, it is easy to lose sight of just how important democracy is. It's not that we don't appreciate our freedoms, but that we often take them for granted. We sometimes face contested elections, but no one would seriously question the integrity of the electoral process in my country, Denmark, which is the country of both Dr. Elklit and myself, or here in the United States. But many people are not so lucky around the world. They live in societies where there is no right to vote, or where the franchise has been rendered meaningless. Sometimes this is the result of ill will among ruling elites. At other times, societies simply lack the capacity, the necessary infrastructure to conduct successful elections. While the disenfranchisement of many or millions of people may not affect us directly, its indirect effects are very, very real. I think if history teaches us anything, it is that over time free and democratic societies flourish, while those without stable democratic institutions wither. Holding an election by itself is no guarantee that democracy has taken root. North Korea, after all, conducted a national election just yesterday. What we do know, however, is that without periodic elections that allow people the freedom to choose among competing ideas and political parties, democracy cannot grow. Since its inception in 1987, the International Foundation of Electoral Systems has been at the forefront of supporting citizens' rights to participate in free and fair elections. One of IFES' most prestigious awards, the Baxter Award, honors an individual with a proven track record of exceptional dedication to improving the way in which people have a say in the way they are governed. And this brings me to tonight's honoree. In the last 2 decades, few people have made greater contributions to election administration and the rights of voters than Dr. Elklit. The impact of his work has been felt in Asia, in Africa, and in Europe, where he has served in numerous high-level advisory positions. He just came back from South Africa, but I have an example from South Africa where he served as a member of the Independent Electoral Commission, which administered the first elections after the end of apartheid. And by the way, where all adult citizens could vote for the first time. As a scholar, he has also devoted his life to democracy. His research has focused on the development of electoral and party systems, conflict and democracy, voting patterns, the role of international organizations in elections, and electoral integrity, and I could go on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating this year's recipient of the Baxter Award, Dr. Jørgen Elklit.
I suppose you can all understand that I feel overwhelmed by the kind words which have been used to characterize my work over a couple of decades. But I'm also proud to have been chosen as a recipient of the 2030 Joe Baxter Award, because it links me and my name directly with that of Joe Baxter's, and also with the previous outstanding recipients of this prestigious IFES award. But kind words are not enough. Sometimes you need good colleagues to ask tough questions. And I think I'll mention what my good colleague in the University of Aarhus in Denmark said when he heard that I had been chosen for this award. His name is Georg Jensen. He is a well-known IR scholar. And he said, where is it you have been working over the world for democracy and good elections? And he mentioned the countries he knew about: Afghanistan, South Africa, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Kyrgyzstan, Bosnia, and a number of others. And he said, what's the situation of democracy in those countries? He said, you also worked in China with village elections. How is it going there, actually? So what are you actually celebrating? And some of you might also have read the article in this week's Economist about the situation of democracy around the world. And some tough questions can be asked about what the situation actually is for democracy and elections. And I'm not sure I have the answers for those tough questions, but they in any case have to be asked and thought about so that we can know what we are doing. I want to use this opportunity to reflect on a topic which has aroused my concern since my very first election advisory mission to Nepal in 1990 and 91. I was also reminded of it some days ago in South Africa, where I spent this term as a visiting professor in Cape Town. The topic is electoral inclusivity, and electoral inclusivity is a key element in what is now termed electoral integrity. And inclusiveness, inclusivity, and integrity are sine qua non if democracy shall prevail. Electoral integrity has, of course, become the new buzzword in electoral parlance when one wants to refer to what was earlier called free and fair elections, or elections which are acceptable, or elections devoid of violence and fraud, and so on. But I think these expressions all cover the same phenomenon, namely elections which are seen as having been conducted as elections should be conducted, according to relevant legislation, international standards, and basic democratic norms. Recent examples of this parlance include Kofi Annan and his Global Commission's 2012 report, Deepening Democracy, a Strategy for Improving the Integrity of Elections Worldwide, and Professor Pierre Pipano's big-scale research project on election quality, the Electoral Integrity Project. The first annual report from that project, in which I play a minor role, was published very recently. It makes for interesting reading, and I think you should all have a look at it. One of the claims in the Kofi Annan report is that a high level of electoral inclusivity is a key element in an election with integrity. I really do agree, as I contend that all apologies eligible voters should be in the electoral register on election day. How can we speak of the right to vote as an undeniable human right if not everything is being done to ensure that all in the relevant age group can actually enjoy his or her right to participate in the election of his or her country's political leaders, that is president, parliamentarians, and local councillors? If the answer is that it's good enough that a right to register as a voter is respected and not denied to anyone, then I must ask, why is it that it is always the poor, the women, the young, and the socially marginalized in the electorate or among the voters who are underrepresented? How can anybody claim that it's because these groups, probably after mature deliberation, have come to the conclusion that they don't want to or need to participate in the selection of the country's leaders? My claim is that many of them are being excluded for structural reasons, and that it therefore is necessary that everything possible, that all citizens, everything possible is being done to ensure that all citizens with voting rights are actually included in the electorate by being properly registered. The obvious solution to this challenge is automatic registration. That is, that the voter registry is developed as an integral part of other forms of civil registration, most natural as a byproduct of the country's general ID system. This is what has happened in a number of European countries, and the same idea is being pursued around the globe, even though there are difficulties in many places and at many levels. As a number of countries, not least in Africa and Asia, are not yet there, one must ask why it is that the electoral authorities, and sometimes also organizations supporting elections, claim that it's good enough to accept to work with lower targets than what corresponds to the fulfillment of the universal norm. That is, that the registration target should be 100% of the estimated so-called voting age population, VAP. I can already hear electoral commissions and registration authorities cry from all over. That is unrealistic. Our resources are too scarce, our country is too big, some people don't even want to be in a register. I know all that, but one should still aim at doing one's utmost if that ultimate target is not yet achieved. As I said earlier, I learned on my very first assignment as an electoral advisor to Nepal in 1991 that electoral enumerators do not always go the extra mile to ensure that voters are correctly registered. And maybe that is understandable in the Himalayas, but it's not good enough. We see the same happen in many countries, and I'll just refer to the recent elections in Kenya and Zimbabwe, both notorious for their poor electoral registers, even though it's for different reasons that they lack in quality. I was secretary to the Independent Review Commission, which in 2008 investigated the quality of the election administration in the miserable December 2007 elections in Kenya. One of our results was that the electoral register was in poor condition, and we suggested that it be scrapped completely and a new voter register established as part of the complete overhaul of election administration and legislation. This has happened, but there are still millions of Kenyans who are not being registered. Why does nobody speak about that? So my first claim is that it should be good if Electoral Management Board would always publish turnout as a percentage of VAP, because then the actual quality of the voter registration process would be much more transparent, which would be an advantage for all, not only the organizations themselves, but also for analysts and donors. The quality and completeness of the voter register can also be used directly to assess the general quality and competences of the EMBs and their dedication to allowing all potential voters the right to vote, not only as something written in the Constitution, but something real. The Independent Electoral Commission in South Africa at the time of the first democratic election in 1994, where I had the honor of serving as a member, had a relatively relaxed approach to who should be able to vote and what should cause a ballot to be rejected. Our argument was formulated succinctly by Democratic icon Helen Sussman, who was also on the commission. And she said, when the large majority of the electorate has been deprived of voting rights during the entire apartheid era, then we are not the ones who shall take their voting rights away for silly bureaucratic reasons. And she added, I actually don't mind that someone not entitled to vote actually vote, if that's the price for ensuring that we don't, through our rules, disenfranchise someone who was disenfranchised during apartheid. By this, she referred to the many voters' lack of proper IDs because of the pass laws under apartheid, or the lack of education which made it difficult to mark the ballot paper in the prescribed way. Some may see this as laxity, but we saw it as a way of increasing inclusivity, thereby giving these elections maximum electoral integrity. I think we did achieve that in part because of the high turnout and the very low level of rejected ballots. I have already mentioned that I currently have good opportunities to follow the preparations for the May national and provincial elections in South Africa. But I have to report that the South African Electoral Commission informs that its registration target is 80% of the projected population. 80%. It was reached the other day, and that is fine, but again I must ask, why not aim for more? Why not develop a system where the onus for registration is not on the voters themselves, but on one or another public authority? Electoral inclusivity is a key indicator of electoral integrity, but inclusivity is not only about voter registration. It is also to a very high degree connected to what kind of electoral system a country has decided to apply. When I started in this field, one of the mantras was not to challenge or try to change a country's electoral system. Country's sovereignty in this area should definitely be respected. I still remember trying to quietly argue in 1990 and 91 that Nepal would be better off with some kind of proportional representation than the first-past-the-post system it then had. I think later developments in Nepal has demonstrated that I was right, but it didn't happen at the time. So it was a positive surprise when I noticed in the Kofi Annan report that it argues that PR is generally preferable to majoritarian electoral systems. PR systems allow electoral losers more space from which they can hope to win later elections. This obviously reduces the tension after elections, as it is a way to create a kind of mutual security system for the main contestants. PR also gives more voters political representation in parliament or local councils, which increases their feeling of actually being citizens, included in and accepted by the polity. I have no doubt that this increase in inclusivity contributes to making all voters, but especially those supporting the electoral losers, more responsible and active citizens than they would have been under majoritarian electoral systems. The Kofi Annan report, leaning towards a general recommendation of PR, even though the wording is very cautious, is in any case interesting, and I see it as a very welcome development. Electoral systems are important, which is why their advantages and disadvantages should be discussed openly. Sometimes they are also decisive and well chosen. They can have very positive consequences. South Africa's deliberate choice of a fully proportional system, even without an electoral threshold, is clearly one of the reasons, together with professional electoral administration, why the level of electoral integrity is so high in the country, despite other problems one can mention, such as the level of registration or the unwillingness to declare all sources of political finance. The last topic I'll touch upon in my discussion of electoral inclusivity is how to secure the political participation and representation of women. This is important because it's a substantial part If a substantial part of female citizens or voters don't feel politically included because they're not registered as voters or not represented politically by some of their own gender, there is a substantial risk that political decision-making does not properly reflect the visions and interests of women. Obviously, this kind of representation is most easily achieved if the political parties themselves can balance the percentage of men and the percentage of women they nominate in winnable positions. When this does not happen, quotas and other instruments might be used, as also highlighted in a recent policy directive from the UN Focal Point for Electoral Assistance. But to what degree is this fully appreciated by the voters? An interesting experiment is now taking place in Kenya, where the 2010 constitution established 47 single-member constituencies where only women can stand. But all voters, men and women, can vote for their preferred woman candidate at the same time as they're voting for the ordinary constituencies where women can also stand. Turnout in the elections last year was not very different in the two kinds of elections, so most male voters must also have voted in the women-only contest. And it's my impression that there was at least as much contestation in the women's-only elections as in the ordinary elections. So now there are relatively more women in Kenya's parliament than before last year's elections, 19 as compared to 9%. But the percentage of women elected in the ordinary constituencies has actually declined. So the messages are split, and we don't know yet if the Kenyan way of getting more women into parliament is the way forward or not. Today, more than 100 countries have introduced some type of women quota, and women are moving forward and taking political responsibility. But it remains to be seen if quotas and other instruments actually strengthen the political influence and clout of women MPs, which must be what one wants to achieve. I'm convinced that all kinds of efforts to improve the level of voter registration, the level of proportionality in seat allocation as compared to voter distribution, and the level of female representation in representative bodies will contribute to increased electoral integrity and acceptance of election results as legitimate. Other fields such as political finance and the quality of EMBs are also important. There's no denying of that. But I thought I had to restrict myself to one topic only. So thank you for your attention, and thanks again to IFES for 2030 Joe Baxter Award. It's really appreciated.
Our work clearly is not done. Challenges were put before us by someone who has been committed to providing both the intellectual framework as well as the on-the-ground experience in country after country after country. Thank you so much for the remarks. Those were inspiring. They laid out the challenge, and I only wish you'd been with us at our board meeting today, because we had about a 2.5-hour robust discussion, and we could have used that framework quite well. Please join me in congratulating our honoree one more time. Thank you.